This is Bonjour Chai, the Gatekeepers of Heaven edition. I'm Avi Feingold, and I'm here with Phoebe Maltzbovy. We are your Frozen Chosen. On today's show, we talk about the lists of Zionists that have been going around on Twitter, and we talk about who gets to call themselves Jewish and the controversy around Joe Roberts. All this and more. Stay tuned. Phoebe, how's it going?
All right. How are you doing, Afi?
I am well. I had a couple days away. I went to Kentucky to drink bourbon. Well, it's always a fun thing to do.
That's good.
I liked your column.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And I want to talk about it before we get to our main topic. So give us a quick rundown on your column and let's get into it.
Sure. So like many in media in one way or another, I noticed this spreadsheet, a crowd-sourced spreadsheet making the rounds last week, called Is Your Fave Author a Zionist? Fave spelled F-A-V, all lowercase, okay? It's basically what it sounds like. It's a crowdsourced spreadsheet where you can look up whether various well-known or less well-known novelists generally are Zionists. Now, what does a Zionist mean in this context? Basically, anybody who has ever, like if you on October 7th posted something about being sad about Hamas's attack on Israel, that's by the standards of the spreadsheet Zionist. And there is a whole color-coded thing on it that allows people to determine whether an author is in red, pro-Israel or Zionist, in orange, neutral, in yellow, they don't mention anything, green, it's complicated, 6, pro-Palestine, anti-Zionist, and that's in blue, and blue means go. So it's a spreadsheet categorizing authors by level of Zionism. Now, who made this? Who knows? Somebody famous? Probably not. Just some, rando online. However, these things take on lives of their own, as you may recall. Avi, do you remember something called the Shitty Media Men list from the Me Too era?
Yes.
Okay.
I was not on it, thankfully, but...
I'm glad to hear it. As I well remember of that list, one of the people on it was a man I'd had an annoying but by no means abusive interaction with once on Twitter. And he's gay, and he was not sexually harassing any women nor accused of it. So it was kind of interesting.
Maybe it just meant... I'm just riffing. Maybe it meant that they created poor media. Like, they were just not getting media. But I don't think that's the case.
But yeah, the point is that its creator, Moira Donegan, became kind of a well-known media figure, writer, forthcoming author, kind of from this list in some ways. So these lists can become a big deal even if they seem like kind of nothing online. And this one in particular came at a moment where there are a whole bunch of these lists happening. So there are also these different Twitter accounts, Zionists in Twitter accounts. So there's Zionists in publishing, Zionists in film, Zionists in music. And to be clear, the context is not hooray for all these lovely Zionists. The context is these are blacklists. Avoid, avoid, avoid. These are people tainted by the stench of Zionism.
It strikes me, though, it's very interesting. Before we get into the main question about the questions around this, one could actually just subvert the whole thing and start spreading these lists around within the Jewish community and say, buy this person's book, buy this person's movie, go check it out, and saying, yay, look at these, and like these are people to support. But
indeed, so that does actually bring us to this one of the central things we're talking about, which is that indeed you get people who look at this as quite the opposite and say like, aha, these are people, yes, exactly like you say, who, if you are pro-Israel, maybe you would want to support them. And it's interesting because this came up, something very similar came up when we had Erica Dreyfuss come on to talk about her
It's right where my mind was going, actually.
Yes.
Because I kept asking myself, as you're talking about this, how is what she is doing different?
So for listeners who may not remember that episode, Erica Dreyfuss, who's a writer and also involved in sort of behind the scenes things to do with writing, has a list, it's Writers Beware, of publications that are anti-Israel or perhaps anti-Semitic in some way, that basically, like, if you were a Jewish writer, perhaps with fond feelings in some capacity or complicated feelings, whatever, about Israel, maybe you don't want to go with this publication because they've said no Zionists or something like that, right? That was the gist of this writers beware. So I think you can talk about the differences, like geopolitical, whatever, but also just on a very practical sort of standpoint, they are aimed at doing two different things. Erica Dreyfuss is trying to talk to writers who are sending their work out and trying to help their odds of getting that writing published. So she's saying, if you are a Jewish writer with a certain stance on Israel, you're probably wasting your time sending your stuff to such and such public, to Guernica, right?
Yes,
you're probably wasting your time sending your stuff to Guernica. She's not saying don't read Guernica. She's saying don't bother sending your stuff to Guernica. They're not going to publish it. The list is writers beware, not readers beware. It might function both ways, but I was
going to say, because at some point...
So there would be overlap. The difference with this, your faves list, your faves are problematic. The problematic fave, really a thing from like 2015 era, that is more about fandom, about audience, about consumers of media, right? People who are reading these books, watching movies, whatever, telling them what to listen to, what to buy, and so forth, or what not to.
Haven't we been doing this as a Jewish community for a long time already? I mean, I think about two names that come to mind right away. Roger Waters, for a very long time, people have been like, don't buy Roger Waters' stuff. You may be a huge Pink Floyd fan, but you can't have any Roger Waters stuff because he's so pro-Palestinian.
Or Wagner.
Or Wagner. Well, I wasn't going to get into the answer. I was specifically trying to focus on that.
Yeah.
But there are other artists that whose name gets circulated. Taylor Swift. My daughter was distraught because she came home from school one day and found out that Taylor Swift had donated to a pro-Palestinian auction or something, and therefore that made her anti-Semitic all of a sudden, and she wasn't supposed to listen to her anymore. And this was the stuff going around sixth grade at the time. Like, we do this all the time also. I think that it's not limited to...
I'm going to try to not have this we do what type conversation. I don't
Correct, yes.
level for this. Because I think what I'm trying to do is talk about what the lists are and not to say that the equivalent doesn't. The equivalent or things like this exist. I'm not trying to do the like hypocrisy type conversation. Like, I think everybody has the thing of like purity politics.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with this list. This Zionists in whatever.
Well, one thing you could say is it's wrong regardless of the politics. That's one angle of it.
I would tend to agree with that.
Another, I should say that like something that occurred to me when I was looking at this is that my own faves probably are almost all anti-Zionist because I like Britcoms, and I don't think about this. But this list specifically, there are a couple things come up. One is this just a list of Jews? And to some extent, the answer is yes and no. So you will find a certain pattern where people who were very sad after October 7th were very often Jews, right? Like, that's not strange. Yep. And if you're going to say that somebody who was sad right after the Hamas attack, before Israel had even done anything in retaliation, if you're going to call that Zionism, a stance that has nothing to do with where you think the war went and whether you think there should have, like how you think Israel should have responded. If you were just simply sad on October 7th or 8th and that's Zionism and problematic and you should be canceled, then that's just anti-Semitism. That would be one angle of it. Okay, so but I don't think the lists are totally, it's not lists of Jews because like Naomi Klein gets blue. Like, she's fine. She's pro-Palestinian enough for this document. So these are not lists of Jews.
And there are non-Jews that are Zionist as well.
Right. So I think it's anti-Zionist Jews are a kind of marginal phenomenon. Zionist non-Jews are by no means a marginal phenomenon, right?
Correct. Yes, there are many Zionist non-Jews.
The way to, right. But the point is, if you have a definition of Zionist that includes was sad when Jews were massacred, is that great? Like, I think that's a little bit, if you're going to not touch a writer because they, I think that's not great. And yes, you can say it goes both ways. And if somebody posted something where they were sad about what's happening in Gaza, and then you're like, anti-Semite won't buy their stuff, that's bad in the same way.
Yeah, so just to use the Roger Waters example, because it's pervasive. Roger Waters has for years and years been pro-Palestinian, and that's why Jews, not all Jews, but definitely many enough that it's a phenomenon, say don't listen to Roger Waters' music. But in this case, one statement alone is enough to put you on this list, and that's a problem. And the fact is that the majority of these people on this list happen to be Jewish, even though I will point out, and you may disagree with me, that this list seems to be very carefully saying Zionists and has trying to show that there's Jews and non-Jews on both sides. This is a problem because as soon as you have sympathy for Jews being massacred, then that automatically makes you a Zionist.
The only thing that I think I have to push back on there, I don't think that this is about cherry picking people's statements. This seems to be very intensely looking at people's statements and considering silence itself to be conspicuous. So this isn't like somebody said one thing I think we're objecting on different levels. I'm not saying that the problem is that each writer hasn't had their politics sufficiently poked at. I'm saying the problem is perhaps poking
in general.
In
I'm
that
with
way.
You.
And then I wanted to step back, though, because the aspect of this that interests me isn't this Roger Waters one. I think everybody does this on all sides. That's not the point. My point is that there has been, and this comes back to that Franklin Foer Atlantic article, there has been a real sort of American Jewish primarily, although also Canadian Jewish culture, right? That's been in the mainstream, things like the show Seinfeld or Woody Allen movies or whatever, this kind of hybrid thing that developed over the 20th century and into the 21st of, Jews in entertainment, not in some sort of sinister sense of controlling it, but right, like a Jewish presence in the culture. And what you see here happening with this kind of, this is the Zionist entertainment, this is the anti-Zionist entertainment, this is the Zionist literature, this is the anti-Zionist literature split. So this again, we talked about this with Erica Dreyfus as well. What does it mean for the culture if Jews kind of feel they must or just choose to sort of split off, right? And if there's Jewish culture,
I don't think that's I'm not worried about that. I mean, if you look at the first example that you gave, the shitty men list,
yeah.
Right? How many people refer to that now? And it's barely been 10 years. Do you still go and look at which authors you should or shouldn't be reading? Do you think people still do that? I
never did this. Okay, this is to be clear about that list. It was a mix of accusations of assault and this man was rude once, this man mansplained once. It was a really wide-ranging thing that basically...
That's my point, is that the fact that as soon as this gets shown to be so wide-ranging as to be meaningless, then it stops being really relevant in the conversation, aside from the most egregious examples. And so that's why this type of list doesn't really worry.
But I also think the analogy doesn't hold because I personally, I will speak for myself, I think if a man is a serial rapist going around in his workplace assaulting his subordinates, I do not consider that to be equivalent to somebody being pro-Israel. Allow me to say this on the Canadian Jewish news here, but somebody who said they believe Israel has the right to exist, I do not think should be put on a list for shittiness.
Again, I agree with you.
Or I'm on that list, then fine, so be it. I'm not too bothered. But
yeah. Can we get on their radar at least? I feel like that might, do wonders for our careers. If only I could rise to the level of being on the Zionists in whatever list, then I'll have made it.
This is something though about the whole, and this comes up with every permutation of these cancel culture debates that if you were never presenting yourself as a good progressive with all the right politics, you can't be knocked off the list of good progressives with all the right politics because it's not surprising. Nobody cares. Nobody thinks you're going to care if they're mad at you. I don't think we could. You would have to first, Avi, what you would have to do is first claim to be doing all of these Instagram posts where you're promising to do better and all of that. And then do something problematic. Oh,
yeah, I guess.
So it requires a lot of legwork
so much
that might
work.
be just...
It's like being an influencer, but
it is
for Zionists. And
so
no patience for that.
Who has the time? So
well, it's about creating identities and deciding if those identities actually work or not, which does lead us to our next topic, which we will get to right after we hear from our sponsor.
I can't date women right now because I'm too busy calling myself a piece of shit. I had a dysfunctional Jewish mother and I had a dysfunctional Native mother.
I had 25 full years of utter struggle and failure.
I started to realize the absurdity of my inability to let go of this monster of guilt.
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Hi, I'm Ralph Benrig. I'm the host of Not That Kind of Rabbi, where we look at people's spiritual journeys and take a little time for their self-reflection, and maybe yours. You can get it all at the cjn.ca/ntkr, or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right. So yes, as we were talking about identity in the previous discussion and who gets to discuss the identity of yourself or other people or not, there was a story that came out this week. It's a little bonkers for me to wrap my head around. So Phoebe, give our readers the rundown on Joe Roberts and why this became bigger than it should have been, and why we should care about it.
Okay. So Joe Roberts, for those who do not know, is and then that's where it gets tricky. So he is somebody who came on my radar as a Twitter personality, somebody who has, per his bio in a JTA. So the most I've learned about him formally is that he wrote an article for the JTA, Jewish Telegraphic Agency, that appeared February 2nd of this year, called "I Left the U.S. Fearing Anti-Semitism Under Trump. October 7th has me rethinking my place in Canada, too." And the first sentence of this article, Avi, ready?
Yes.
"I am and always have been an American Jew." Okay. So basically, he wrote in this article that he worries that he and his family are going to have to become refugees on account of their Jewishness from Canada, where they now live. Mm-hmm. Okay, so and I wrote about this because I saw this, another American Jew who moved to Canada and is noticing anti-Semitism in Canada. So I use this as a pretext to write about sort of the whole thing of assessing relative anti-Semitism levels in Canada versus the US, right? That was why I wrote about this. Joe Roberts had been on my radar as somebody who's just extreme, a real committed social media poster, mm-hmm. Pro-Israel, anti-Semitism type content with a Canadian angle to it. Now, as somebody who works at the Canadian Jewish News, it seemed important for me to follow somebody like this on social media to see what they're posting because, this is my line of work, right? And I'm interested. The reason he came on my radar recently is that somebody decided, and somebody being specifically Christy Olson on Twitter. This person, Christy, wrote, "I guess it's time." And then at Joe Roberts 01, "When you talk about your Jewish grandmother, do you mean Grandma Jessie or Grandma Vida?" And she juxtaposes some writing by Joe Roberts about grandma, who is Jewish, with two gravestone photographs. Christy is claiming that these are Joe Roberts's two grandmothers, both of which have crosses on them and are clearly of Christian women. Are these two mm-hmm. Christian women Joe Roberts' actual grandmothers? Who knows? I don't know. I don't have the time or the interest to figure this out. But the point is, Christy seems pretty convinced of this. And what follows is this whole sort of attempt at an expose that he isn't who he says he is. And what happens is a lot of glee on X, formerly Twitter, about how this great big Zionist, who's always saying, as a Jew this, as a Jew that, I'm the real Jew, I have the politics of a real Jew, is not really Jewish. And we have not done any independent investigation.
So yeah, I was going to say we are not doing investigative reporting here. We did reach out to him to be on the show. He said that he's consulting counsel at this time and he could not speak publicly because of any ongoing legal situation. And so we're not here to discuss that.
Yes, although he gave some kind of public statement on Twitter about this where he said, I have devoted my life to Jewish tradition and have spent the past 20 years serving the Jewish community in leadership roles. No one can diminish my bond with Judaism, erase my family's Jewish legacy, or negate my children's Jewish identity, especially not those driven by animosity or hatred. So that's the first tweet. He does not say in this tweet, I am Jewish, which is interesting. Then he writes, now this is important, Avi, for what's going to follow in our discussion. His next tweet, the essence of one's relationship with Judaism and family is inherently personal. Every Jew across all denominations, whether by birth, choice, or affirmation, is a Jew, is a Jew, is a Jew, and a family is more than the nuclear. And then he gets on. He goes on to say about that he's consulting legal counsel. Okay, now I think this is interesting because, and what I really want to just sort of establish before we move on to the main part of the discussion is, indeed, it is not our interest here to figure out Joe Roberts' personal deal, but there are two different questions here, one of which is whether a specific person made up specific biographical details that are false, which we are not trying to address. And another is this broader point about who counts as a Jew and this gatekeeping issue. And that is what struck me as interesting about this whole story, not whether this particular person, because like we were first talking about this as like, does this fit in with all these scandals about like pretendian and all of this, like about people pretending to be indigenous who aren't. And I'm thinking, well, it isn't that, because you can convert to Judaism and because Jews come in all backgrounds, right? So it's not the same as that, but what are we talking about basically? So
it as you point out, it's complicated because, as I've said on the show many times, there's no Jewish pope, so nobody gets to have the official ruling. But there are denominations with broadly accepted practices of how one, is part of the community or is not part of the community. And even where one has a wider scope and wider definition of what it means to be part of the community, there are always discussions and limits. Where do we create that line? How do we create that line? And who creates those lines is different and unique across everything. So within Orthodox Judaism, one would say that you have to convert. I would say within just about every major denomination within Judaism, conversion is part of the process of saying you are not until you are. Does that make sense? Does that start answering what's going on here?
Yes, it does. I mean, I guess I kept thinking that like, this is really, who is Jewish? Is this really, it's this question of what does Jewish mean? And I feel like this is something that the outside world both doesn't understand, but also like, do Jews ourselves have any sort of consensus on this? Because it is so...
so that's the weird part, because you can become Italian by becoming an Italian citizen, and your name could be, O'Hagan, and you're going to claim Italian culture because you say, I'm a citizen of this country and I believe in the cultures, and you may not have the ancestry for it, but that's fine. That doesn't matter. And you can convert to any other sort of faith. You can become a Baha'i, a member of the Baha'i faith just by converting. And Judaism seems to try to like fit into both pieces here, where there is a lot of heritage and culture, which one can, be into and like and follow the culture. One can become an Israeli citizen, even if they're not Jewish. And yet for the idea of Judaism, it's a religion, and there's a conversion process that goes on. So I guess the messy part is what happens when somebody says, I'm not Jewish. I've never been Jewish. I don't want to convert to Judaism, but I love deli food and I love Israel and I love all of this like stuff that is culturally very Jewish, and I want to associate with all of those things. What do you say about that person?
Okay, Avi, perfect note, because I wanted to ask about this exactly. So I find that there are a lot of internal Jewish discussions about gatekeeping that assume, exactly like you're talking about, this sort of person who really, really, really wants in on being Jewish and is perhaps they are Jewish by any definition, but are turned away from, at community events because they don't look like a, stereotypical Ashkenazi Jew, for one reason or another or whatever. And this whole question of like people who feel that the Jewish community is rebuffing them and they want in.
Really? I haven't really heard this.
This comes up a lot in Emily Tamkin's book, Bad Jews. It's very much about like, if you're a convert to Judaism, you're a real Jew, if all of this stuff about like, no, you're a real Jew. Like, don't feel you're any lesser. If you're pro-Palestinian, you're still a real Jew. All of this. Yes. I'm sure, Avi, I think these are things you are familiar with. The question is there, in fact, this throng of people who want to claim to be Jewish and are not? And that is what I think is a kind of interesting question. And specifically, if I can just sort of zoom out a little, numerically, where does that fall relative to the people who are Jewish, were born Jewish, and want out, and do not want to be associated with anything to do with Jews or being called Jewish or whatever?
All of these edge cases are interesting because edge cases are the things which help you define what your
okay, but Avi, what I'm trying to ask you specifically
is.
about with edge cases, do you think that there are more edge cases of people who want in to being Jewish or who want out? Like,
I think that the edge cases, it's easy to be out. Right. The edge cases of the people that want out, they just stop identifying as Jewish. Right. Nobody checks if you've been to shul in the past year. Right.
Well, it's interesting you should say that. Yeah, people do. So historically, absolutely, you can think of the Spanish Inquisition or the Holocaust.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Exactly. That's why I sprung it on you just then. But do you think our listeners know Monty Python?
I would hope so.
I would hope so too. I think what you get historically, even to bring up our favorite historical topic, the Dreyfus Affair, a lot of Jews who did feel sort of unaffiliated, kind of wanted out, didn't feel like they had any connection to Jewishness. And in moments, what I was going to say is in moments of rising anti-Semitism, or where there's a sense that people suddenly hate Jews, I think a lot of the sort of unaffiliated suddenly feel very Jewish. And that's another thing that can happen.
Or the opposite happens and they have an easy out to walk away. And they say, nobody knows.
That's true. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there are two different things. There's who's Jewish by religious standards, and those are varied. It depends on denomination, like you're saying. But then there's also just who's Jewish in their lived experience, to use the once popular expression. And I think that is a much bigger set of people because it includes people who are secular. It includes people who maybe or maybe not, like Joe Roberts, have Jewish family and kind of live in Jewish spaces such that, not to be bleak, anti-Semitism affects them, right? Like if you are not Jewish, but you have Jewish family, you have Jewish kids, you have Jewish cousins, Jewish whatever, and suddenly the world seems terrible for Jews, you may feel impacted by this in some way. And does that make you personally Jewish? No, but it makes you kind of part of the Jewish community in some
Let me ask you a
respect.
question then. Somebody who isn't Jewish admits readily that they have no Jewish heritage, no Jewish background, no Jewish parents, no Jewish grandparents, none of that. They love Jewish culture. They love Jewish music. They play in a klezmer band. They make Ashkenazi food. They like going to Jewish events with their friends. They've learnt Hebrew. I'm not even get to Yiddish to be Ashkenormative about it. Like whatever it's going to be, they really identify with all of these things, and they just have zero Judaism whatsoever. They just feel that this is the culture that they love. How should we refer to this individual? How should this individual refer to themselves?
Okay, Avi, I'm going to have to throw back a question at you, which is, have you ever heard of a person doing this? Is this a type? Is this something you have invented, or is this something?
No, I've met people. I've met people that are not Jewish that are deeply embedded in Jewish culture. Yeah,
but do they call? Okay, yes. So
they don't call themselves necessarily Jewish, but that's the interesting.
So have I. But I feel like I know plenty of people like this to a point. But like you say, they're not saying that they're Jews. To me, that is somebody who has a great cultural interest. Like a lot of people are culturally interested in like Japan,
Yeah, exactly.
And they're not saying that they are Japanese if they're not Japanese, right? To me,
it's interesting that you can say that you're a Japanophile, and that's totally acceptable.
Well, people are going to be like
to say that you're a Judeophile. To say that you're a Judeophile, though, is really problematic in this day and age.
I think there are plenty of philo-Semites. Okay, whether I'm not going to be the arbiter of which things are considered problematic or not. I think anybody who has a strong, so I'm going to give a different analogy. We're going to leap to something else. You get a lot of this. Are you familiar with the expression queer baiting?
Ish.
Okay.
Remind our listeners.
I will remind our listeners, and you don't see the scare quotes I'm doing. So this came up with do you know who Harry Styles is?
I'm aware of Harry Styles.
Okay,
yes.
I'm also aware of Harry Styles. Very aware of Harry Styles.
And his styles.
And his many styles, yes. So basically, he is a musician who is known for kind of androgyny that, many, many rock stars obviously have gone for androgyny, but like sort of flirting with the idea that like, is he or isn't he? Like, is he gay? Is he bi? Is he straight? Although I guess he supposedly dated Taylor Swift, whatever that means. I don't know. I have not fact checked that any more than I have fact checked anything to do with Joe Roberts. But the point is, some have accused such pop stars of kind of trying to get the clout of having a minority sexuality while just basically being straight, boring straight people who are just doing this for clout. And I think you get this with all different types of identities where if somebody seems like they're embracing an identity for clout to seem interesting because they're fetishizing the people of that identity, whatever it is, that is considered weird. And yes, I have met people who are like, I love the Jews. The Jews are the best. The Jews are the best. And I'm like, like, leave me alone. Like, that's nice. It's better, I guess, supposed to be better than the reverse. But the reason I also wanted to bring up sexual orientation, all of this, is because you get a lot of discussions lately. So there were just these statistics out about how some huge percent of Gen Z women identify as bisexual. A percentage that seems like hard to believe, although maybe it's true, right? But you get then a lot of people saying, oh, well, they're not really bi. You get people saying, oh, no, they're faking.
Yeah,
but
this is the argument you hear with trans people also.
Well,
right?
no.
If so many people are identifying as non-binary.
Or non-binary, yes, you do there. Okay. Not so much trans, but non-binary, yes. But there, what I was going to say is you don't, because there is so much pushback against the idea of gatekeeping, precisely because how could you ever know? It is impossible to put up that gate because there is no rabbi of bisexuality. There is no pope of bisexuality. That is just in somebody's mind how they feel, right? And you can't gatekeep it in that way.
Yeah, but in this case, there is, by most definitions, something there. And I think, so to get back to our non-Jewish but Judeo-loving individual, I think as long as they are transparent, different type of transparent about the fact that they are not Jewish, technically, by any religious, definition, however wide it is, there is no definition that identifies this person as Jewish, then that's fine. Go and do all the Jewish things you want and say, I just love Judaism and this is what I do.
But Avi, does this ever happen where, apart from possibly at most one case, I guess there was George Santos claimed to be Jewish and the U.S.
Well, so this is our issue
right.
here with a guy like Joe Roberts. The bigger piece that I found really egregious and problematic is when he goes in an article, which I had seen back in November, about his shift from the crazy left to the right wing when it comes to Israel, right? At the very end, he is asked by the interviewer on the personal side, how does it feel to get retweeted by people who are on the opposite sides of the political map? And his response is, okay, it's funny. If it were something about politics in general, it would feel uncomfortable. But in this moment, it doesn't. We're Klal Yisrael, right? We're all one people here. Klal Yisrael is like the people of Israel. And to say that we are all Klal Yisrael is including himself there. And he basically is eliding the fact, whether or not this is true, I don't want to get into it. But if it turns out that he is not actually converted as a Jew, right? These statements are the problematic statements. You don't get to claim that and to then say, like, I'm not actually Jewish. Mm-hmm. You can say the Jewish people are all Klal Yisrael. The Jewish people are all one
right.
people.
So I think, again, once again, I'm going to draw that line between the two issues, which are, if he, for whatever reason, grew up in a heavily Jewish community, whatever, always felt himself to be Jewish, and he's that one unique person who felt like that, but there's no rabbi, whatever, then I'm not bothered. That is a separate question from, is he retroactively claiming a different life history than he had? But I guess what I'm saying is I just keep coming back to this whole thing with like the pretendian topic, right? And when somebody turns out to have been pretending to be indigenous and they're not, this is a scandal. There are articles about it. There
Only
are
for famous people, right? There are very few individuals that are
that's not true. Obviously it's a bigger deal if it's a famous person, but there have been a bunch of cases recently where academics or professors who are not famous people have made careers saying that they are some sort of racialized minority.
Again,
right?
making a career out of it. But it's the opposite. I mean, if my next door neighbor, right, has been talking their whole life about how they were a Native American, and it turns out that they're not, but they're just an accountant. They don't do anything. They don't talk about it. They don't play up their Native American culture. That is not like, nobody's going to care.
The aspect of this I find interesting is it's just helping explain what Jewish identity even is. Because if it turns out that somebody's been lying that they're Native American, right? Or that they're Indigenous Canadian or something like this, and then that's found out, there's no like path other than I lied about who I was mistaken about who I was, I apologize. Whereas if somebody claims that they're Jewish and they're not, they could just become Jewish, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and I'm okay with either path. I just don't have like, I think it's the obfuscation and the clearly deliberate approach to hiding your actual, the piece of the identity that people would actually care about.
We got so into the Jewish identity discussion. Jewish Voice for Peace, organizations that claim to be Jews for, Palestinian rights or Jews against Israel in some capacity or another, do not necessarily consist solely of Jews.
But that's true. As I just said, there are Jews that are high up at CJA. There are Jews that were there. CJPAC, which is the Canadian Jewish Public Action Committee, is primarily non-Jews.
Avi, what I'm saying is I think what's interesting is the way that different identities are valued, right? So allies being valued, but also that like if you are a pro-Palestinian activist, Jews who agree with you are very valuable, more valuable than just random people in the population agreeing with you. If you can point and say, we're not anti-Semitic, look at all of these Jews in our group, or look at how many flyers, like when you see a big rally and you see a bunch of banners that say Jews, Jews against genocide, Jews for ceasefire, whatever, there's a reason for this. And I don't think the reason is solely demographic. I think it might possibly exaggerate the number of Jews.
So then
maybe
so what I'm saying organizations on the right should also,
but the reason
should only have Jews.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I think part of the reason there's this glee about Joe Roberts is, I think it relates to that.
It's a little complicated, but you are right. But it's also like, who are we to actually gatekeep on how that works? And
oh no, I am absolutely 100% prepared to gatekeep on if you're saying I am a Jew who thinks such and such, and you don't actually think you're Jewish or claim to be Jewish, and this is just a banner you're standing under. Yes, I don't think that's okay.
Let's put a pin on that, and let's get to nachas right after this.
Are you in the market for a new watch or a special piece of jewelry? Are you looking for the perfect engagement ring to pop the question? Atelier Lou has all this and more. Eric and the team at Atelier Lou can craft a piece for you, or you can select from some of the exclusive designers that they offer. From a simple bangle to a statement necklace, Atelier Lou can make you or your loved ones sparkle. Located in the heart of Westmount in Montreal or online at atelierlou.com, visit Atelier Lou for your next watch or jewelry purchase. And when you do, make sure to use promo code BON18 for 10% off your next purchase. That's atelierlou.com.
All right, Phoebe, tell me your nachas.
My nachas is going to be the winner of the Westminster Dog Show for two reasons. One is that Sage is a miniature poodle, a female miniature poodle, and my family had a female miniature poodle for many years, so I have a certain fondness for miniature poodles, and this particular one, well-deserved, very, very cute poodle. But also her owner, handler, I believe, is Kaz Hosaka, who this was his retiring performance at Westminster, his final hurrah there as he retires. And he is like this poodle genius. He's just like, he's like the poodle whisperer, and he's known for this. I mean, there are like articles about him and stuff, but I actually once saw him in New Jersey at a dog show, like showing poodles. And it was just like, he's just brilliant at this. It's art. It's really amazing. And I was very excited to see him take the the first prize to see him and Sage. Really, is a lot of credit also goes, of course, to the poodle. Avi, what have you got?
It's getting to be like camp season, and which meant that like my kids were like, we need t-shirts for camp. And we found a t-shirt that had some vaguely Jewish thing at one of these camp stores, and it led me down the rabbit hole of like Jewish merch that exists right now. And I need your help. Can you help me figure out if this is a nachas or a broigus? But I don't know. There's just so many websites that have bad Jewish merch. Some of it is like brilliant Jewish merch, and some of it is like brilliant and bad and weird. And I can't figure out if the explosion of merch that is like highly specific and that like has a lot of inside Jewish jokes is a great thing or a bad thing. And I'll give you a few examples of what some of this merch could be.
I mean, I can already tell what my answer is, because I don't think shirts should say things. So that's my policy.
But what if it's a mug that has on it anti-Semite tears?
What?
Like if you
Are
had
we
a
doing
mug,
basic also? Jews get to be basic too, like everybody else?
Okay. That's what I'm trying to get at. Like I couldn't figure out, is a mug that says anti-Semite tears like funny or stupid?
I don't do this stuff.
Or boxers that say dirty Zionist or fiddle me on the roof?
I don't do shirts or mugs or
I don't either, but I'm just trying to figure out like how bad is this, or is this actually like, great, Jews can do this too?
I mean, it's great. Jews can do this too, in the sense of when you learn that, like, you know, some low-level criminals are Jewish, you say, look, we are represented throughout the population. You know what I mean? Like, it's great in that sense, but like, and I'm not saying it is criminal. It's maybe an aesthetic crime, but that's something else.
It's so great. So I can be broigus on the
But I have
fashion
a question.
sense.
Why are separate shirts needed to be bought for camp? Why not just like the usual?
I don't know, because they don't want they're good shirts or not. I don't know, because they need more t-shirts, because in camp you get fewer laundry days. I mean, to be fair, I'm not going to send my daughter to camp with a shirt that says no penis, still a rabbi.
What?
As in, like, I'm a woman. Don't think that I can't be a rabbi because I'm a woman.
Okay, because I was okay, wait a second. This is probably going to be the best part of the episode. Because I was assuming that this was like, no penis for me, please. I'm a rabbi, and was thinking, but that's the wrong religion. This is not a celibate role. Like, why couldn't? Oh, okay. Yeah. I understand. Okay, so a casual transphobia, because it's assuming a woman couldn't have a penis, but
sure. But I wasn't even going there.
Okay, no, but I'm just saying you could go all sorts of places. But like where I went with this, I was like, I took it to be like, keep that away from me. I'm a rabbi, which is a totally okay.
I mean, what about the women's crop top that says Baruch atah, go fuck yourself?
Where are you finding this?
It's like, I'm telling you, I found this website. It's called dirtyjewishswag.com. There was also leggings with a in like chet, all the way down the side.
I hate to suggest this, but it's called Uniqlo.com, and they have normal shirts.
I like Uniqlo.
I'm not trying to endorse them or Gap or whatever, but like, yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think this all seems, I guess the most positive thing I can say about this is being very openly Jewish in this day and age is, you know, courageous and important. And you can say, fine. I don't know that if you're dressed in a way that makes it clear you're observant, that you need to have this sort of swag to be visibly Jewish. Like,
what I found, there was another website that had like visibly Jewish swag that was inside jokes only for other people from within a certain denomination. Right. Okay. So if you knew about like the Volozhin yeshiva, which was like the big yeshiva that kickstarted the yeshiva movement hundreds of years ago, and then you see like a college style sweatshirt that says Volozhin, like established, whatever it was established, 1803, right? That's kind of cool insidery.
But is anybody wearing that not identifiably an observant Jew?
I'm saying that even if you're identifiably an observant Jew and you're not from within the community that person is wearing it, gets it, isn't going to get that joke.
Right.
I think that's kind of interesting and fun, because you're really trying to make something that's actually funny. Yeah. But I don't know. My favorite was the one that said, I went to Chelm and all I got was this lousy pair of pants.
I think
it's because Helms, like they're a little backwards and not funny, right? There's Isaac Bashevis singer stories about Helms.
Yes, but I'm not unfollowing with the pants.
It's a T-shirt that
says...
it's
a T-shirt that... Sorry, I missed... okay, I see what you're saying. I get it. Now, that is good. No, that is good. I'm just slow, but I got it now, and that's good.
Great conversation. Thank you always, Phoebe, for the enlightening and interesting.
And thank you, Avi, for teaching me so much about the knick-knack world that I didn't know.
Thank you for listening to Bonjour Chai for the week ending May 18th, Shabbat Parashat Emor. The show is produced by Michael Freeman and edited by Zach Kaufman. The executive producer for CJN Podcast is Michael Freeman. Our music is by So-Called. We are a project of the Jewish Living Lab and are distributed by the CJN Podcast Network. You can listen to all our past episodes on our page at thecjn.ca/bonjour, and you can subscribe to the podcast and automatically receive all episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love it if you told a friend about Bonjour Chai. It is one of the best ways that we get new listeners, and as always, please do email us with comments at bonjour@thecjn.ca.
Y'all remember that joke from Airplane? The old lady asked for some light reading.
How about this leaflet, famous Jewish sports legends?
But in actuality, that's changing. Jews are crushing it in sports around the world, and we are here to celebrate them.
Sandy Koufax gets his 10th strikeout.
Zach Hyman, his first career hat trick. 41 points for Diddy Avdia. It's Sue Bird's building.
I'm Gabe.
And I'm Jamie.
We love Jews and we love sports, but most of all, we love kvelling over Jews in sports.
Together we host Menschwarmers, the longest-running Jewish sports podcast in the world. Listen and subscribe at thecjn.ca and wherever you find your podcasts.